Welcome to Golden Black Live. This is our November 17th edition, starting to look a little bit like November around the state of Indiana today. And our special guest for segment one is Jerry Palm, CBSSports.com, and also a regular at in the Purdue press box. You still have a son in the band?
Yes, right. My son's a sophomore in the band.
And this is your second one that's been in, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the second one, his older brother is back in school and is considering trying out for the band next year. So I may end up with two in the band next year. We'll see.
Very cool, and that's a good thing. And a big part of being down here for football Saturdays in West Lafayette, and they've been pretty good this year in terms of attendance and interest. That's been a good thing. I want to thank Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson. All right, Jerry, you're as good as it gets in terms of trying to make sense not only of bowl projections, but when we get to, we'll certainly be talking to you in February and March about where Purdue basketball, men's basketball, and maybe the women as well, getting in the NCAA tournament. But let's talk now. The question of the week around Purdue is, do the Boilermakers have a chance at a 5-7? Now that would mean that Purdue would have to beat Northwestern tomorrow, and then beat Indiana to end the regular season. What say you? You know, you've had Purdue in your bowl projections. You told me a little bit earlier up till this week, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I would say probably less than 50-50. Obviously, you got to get the two wins first to get to 5-7. But this looks like a year. The very first year they allowed this was 2015, I think. Yeah. And there were like 5 teams that year. And since then, excluding the pandemic year, the only one that got a bowl bid that wasn't 500 on bowl selection day was Rice last year. So we haven't needed this very often, but this year has been, pretty chaotic in terms of trying to get teams to bowl eligible. Army and Navy, neither one of them can be eligible, although Army might have been able to do it if the Army-Navy game was earlier. Yeah. But they can't wait for that game. So those two teams are playing 11 games. And by virtue of that this year, we're really looking at 128 teams for 82 spots. And it's hard to do. I mean, the numbers just don't, not everybody can be 500 or better, even with almost everybody playing FCS games, which is, for bowl eligible teams anyway, automatic wins. So, we even, having to go 5-6 against, regular FCS teams, it's hard to do. And getting 82 this year, I think is going to be a challenge. But, for Purdue, a team that's kind of like borderline in terms of getting selected with the APR, the thing you have to keep in mind is if we don't have enough eligible teams, the first 2 teams to fill in are James Madison and Jacksonville State. And that's because those are teams that would have been bowl eligible had they not still been in transition from FCS to FBS. They're in their second year, and second year transition teams if they have good enough records, are the first ones to fill in. So that's 2 spots before you get to the 5-7 teams. And then Purdue is among the teams that I think are in play, about 7th or 8th on that list of teams for 5-7. And if we only need 6 teams, we're not really getting to Purdue. So we need to have about 8 openings before we start getting to where Purdue is.
Yeah, explain. Okay, so Jacksonville State and James Madison, because this is their second year of getting into the FBS. Is that?
So the transition from FCS to FBS is a 2-year process, and for those 2 years, those teams are ineligible for the postseason, at least at the FBS level. I'm not sure, but probably at FCS as well. So they're ineligible for the postseason, which means no conference championship games and no bowl games. And you do not have to play both of your transition years in FBS. You can play them both in FCS. You do need to be in FBS after that second year. Yeah. So James Madison has actually played both years in FBS. Jacksonville State and Sam Houston are in their second year of transition, but their first year in FBS. both in Conference USA. Sam Houston won't get to 6 wins. And then Kennesaw State is still in FCS, and this is their second year of transition to FBS. So they are doing their entire transition in FCS, and then they'll be up next year in FBS. So, and there's another team transitioning that's in their first year. So we're starting to see a bunch of teams come up. But if you're, James Madison, because they're undefeated, it asked for a waiver of that second year requirement, but the NCAA denied that this week. So they are hoping for, fewer than 82 eligible teams so that they can get a spot. And we might see them and Liberty both undefeated and maybe in the same bowl game.
Yeah, ESPN Game Day right there this week, as I recall too. It's a interesting situation. Okay, let's look at Purdue right now. Obviously, you watch this team closely. This has been a funny. I mean, the whole Big Ten West seems like everybody's 5-5. It's not quite that way. Obviously, Iowa's got a 2-game lead. Everybody's in that boat. What have you seen? What do you see in Purdue Northwestern this week? Two teams that have had interesting years, and certainly no one's had a more interesting year than Northwestern. But they played well, and they shocked everybody, at least me, by going up to Wisconsin and putting 24 points up in the first half on the Badgers. But as you look at the landscape, what do you see on Saturday when the Boilermakers and Wildcats face off?
Yeah, well, Gene Katie used to say it's not who you play, but when you play them.
That's right.
And so Northwestern caught Wisconsin at a great time. They're on their backup quarterback because Iowa knocked out Tanner Mordecai a couple weeks ago, and they just haven't been the same. Indiana caught them at a good time too. Yeah. And so now Wisconsin, Purdue played them. I don't know if Purdue could beat them if they ran the band on the field the way it goes against Wisconsin. But, Purdue's schedule really was not favorable for a team on a first-year coach and replacing half the roster because of all the guys who left. I mean, not just the seniors, but a lot of guys who left when Jeff Brom left. And so it's been a rough transition year. But, the Big Ten West is basically a 7-car wreck, that Iowa finds ways to win because their defense is so much better than any other unit that any team in this league in that division has. Yeah. So they're going to win 10 games and win the division, and it's going to be like the ugliest 10-game win team that we may have ever seen. Anybody else, any game is a toss-up. So Purdue at Northwestern, toss-up game. It's Purdue goes out and plays the way they played against Minnesota. They have a really good chance to win. The defense has played pretty well. Northwestern is more of an Iowa-like team in the sense that their defense is ahead of their offense, and their defense usually carries them. So if Purdue is able to execute offensively and, get into the mid-20s, that's a lot of pressure on Northwestern's offense to score at that level against Purdue's defense, which, is still ahead of Purdue's offense, I think. You wouldn't know it necessarily by the Minnesota game. So it's just really just a matter of who runs their stuff better, who executes better, takes care of the ball, basic stuff. In all of these Big Ten West toss-up games, you've got to bring your best on the road, and you've got to play well to win, because you're probably going to get a little help from the other team. I mean, that's just this. Nobody in the Big Ten West plays well enough where you can just say, that team is definitely going to win. There's no definitely going to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah, that has been a true statement. All right, your intrigue around the CFP. You have, I know, Michigan, so you're making the assumption Michigan will beat Ohio State, which is a fair assessment. But any chance for both of them to get in?
No, not this year. Last year, they both got in.
Yeah,
but there wasn't a lot of competition for that 4th spot. This year you're 8 teams deep potentially in terms of teams that could compete for that 4th spot. So it would take a significant amount of chaos and upsets in the 2 weeks we have left in the regular season plus the championship games in order for the loser of that game to have a chance to get in, because you've got the potential for Washington and Oregon to both have 12 wins. You've got the potential for Alabama and Georgia to both have 12 wins. If Texas gets to 12 wins, and you've got Florida State undefeated, and you've got the winner of the Michigan-Ohio State team undefeated, an 11-1 team that didn't win its league doesn't really have much of a shot this year. and especially a Big Ten team, because I don't think this committee really respects the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And you see it more with how they've treated Michigan than Ohio State, because Ohio State has a non-conference win on the road against a team in the rankings. But Michigan's schedule actually ranks higher than Georgia's. In fact, Georgia's schedule is the lowest ranked of any of the teams in the top 8, and it's not even close. But in that schedule rankings, but I think when they eyeball evaluate it, once you get past, the big 3 in the East and maybe Iowa, they look at all of those other teams as the same and way, way, way behind those 4 teams.
Yeah.
So, and it's really 2 tiers even among that group, 3 tiers among that group. So I don't think the committee respects the Big Ten enough to put an 11-1 team in the field. If there was enough chaos, Ohio State might have a chance. Michigan at 11-1 is not going anywhere.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, and then other Big Ten teams in bowl games. I saw that you have Ohio State making that assumption they lose in the Orange Bowl, which is really the Big Ten's top bowl this year, right? Because the Rose is part of the CFP. Explain that.
And it's not even technically the Big Tens. It just looks likely to be the Big Tens. Yeah. That spot in the Orange Bowl has got an ACC team against the highest rated team available out when the playoff is done. From the Big Ten, the SEC, or Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So if Alabama beats Georgia and you have the loser of Michigan and Ohio State there, it's possible that's an SEC spot.
Yeah.
So 12-1, Alabama or Georgia would beat out 11-1, Michigan or Ohio State for that spot. But I don't expect that. I expect Georgia to win. Therefore, the projection is Ohio State for that spot.
Will this become easier? I mean, now when you jump to 12 teams, I mean, how do you view the whole 12-team playoff and how all of this will play out? I mean, it'll still be a lot of battling for who's going to finish 12th and 13th and get in.
Right.
I mean, will that increase your type of projections, the interest in those kind of things because of that, or will it lessen it?
Oh, probably more, because more teams will be involved.
Yeah.
In terms of my actual work, I think it'll be easier. For one thing, at least 4, if not all 6 of those bowls are going to be part of the playoff every year. So you don't have to project those games, right? So now you're just projecting, in terms of bowls, all of the other games. You're still projecting the rankings, but it's, you're seeding it. You're not saying which bowl game these teams are going to be in. And in fact, the first round games are all home.
Yeah.
So which I like. I like the fact that we're getting first round home games. I wish the next round was home games as well, so that everybody got a home game. But you can't get all the big bowls worked into it if you go 2 rounds of home games. So, that was more important, I guess. So the quarterfinals and semifinals will be the 6 bowls that we're used to seeing rotating order, and then the final will be somewhere else like it is now.
Yeah.
But so the projecting the rankings will be important in terms of getting the pairings right. Just like doing an NCAA tournament bracket, only smaller. But I won't have to try and guess which bowl game the committee is going to put people in. It'll probably be largely prearranged or based on the location of the teams that get buys. But the semifinals will be picked every year, so it'll just be which 4 for bowl games for those 4 teams, and if they win. So it's it'll definitely be an easier thing. Although the hard part of bowl projections isn't the top, it's the bottom.
Yeah.
It's the 6 and 6 teams, the 5 and 5 teams, the Sun Belt teams, the MAC teams that could just go anywhere where there's no rules, and ESPN moves them around at their whim. And because when you televise all the games, the conference contracts don't mean anything if you want to set something up that's different.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Lastly, we'll talk a little. It's early on Purdue basketball or the NCAA basketball stuff, but when do you start really drilling down into NCAA, looking at the tournament and trying to figure out where teams are going to go and how they're going to go? Is it a January thing? Have you already started it now? What do you start to do with it?
There's no data now. I did a preseason bracket the Friday before the season started that had Purdue as a 1 seed, the 3rd overall. 2 of those 4 teams have already lost, and one of them twice. But I'll do a mid-December update that won't largely be based on the data because the data is no good yet.
Yeah.
The net will be out, but it'll be comical to look at. I mean, it just it's of no value. And then when we get into January, usually the Friday after and before the college football championship, I'll do brackets. And then they're Monday, Friday after that. And then obviously the data gets better as you go along. But even then, at the beginning of January, the data is not all that great.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see. It'll keep you hopping. Jerry, thanks so much for your time. Always enjoy it. And will you be down and will you be in West Lafayette for the Indiana game?
Yes. Yeah, I'll be down for the IU game. I wish I was going to Hawaii, but can't be everywhere.
Can't be everywhere. And they're talking about 30 degrees for that game, so it'll be good to be inside.
It's late November, so
it's November and it's Purdue IU, so that'll be next week. All right, Jerry, thanks again so much. We'll be back for segment 2. Tom Dienhart from GoldenBlack.com will join us, and we'll talk a little bit more about Purdue Northwestern. We'll be back in 2 minutes on Golden Black Live.